The wedding venue was decorated like a fairy tale. Innie stood at the entrance of the Rose Ballroom at the St. Regis Hotel. White roses were piled all along the corridor, and the air was thick with the mixed scent of champagne and perfume. The name Ethan was projected onto the massive circular screen, right next to Serena's name. The lighting made it look like a movie premiere. My groomsmen were all my brothers from college. Leo was next to me fixing my bow tie, mumbling at me not to be nervous. I told him I was not nervous. I had been waiting for this day for 3 damn years. The guests filled the seats in a steady stream. Innie scanned the room, and half of them were from Serena's family. Shareholders and executives of Wen Group, business partners and various other socialites, whose names I could not even recall. My side only had 3 tables, apart from my parents and a few relatives. The rest were the brothers who still wanted to drink with me after my failed startup. By the time the officiant checked his watch for the 3rd time, I already knew something was wrong. My mother sat in the front row, her smile beginning to freeze. My father could still keep his composure, but I could tell he was starting to worry. At 4:20, Serena still had not appeared. Her profile picture on my phone was grayed out. All my messages went unanswered. Innie called her assistant, Zoe. Zoe stammered that Serena was in a meeting. Innie said it was our wedding day. What meeting? Zoe fell silent for 3 seconds and then hung up. And at that moment, I actually understood what was happening, but I still clung to a final shred of hope. At 5 o'clock, Serena's father, Victor, stood up and walked over to me. The entire hall went as silent as a funeral. He patted me on the shoulder and spoke in a volume just loud enough for the front row to hear. "Ethan," Serena says. "She needs a little more time to think it over." I stared at his face, searching behind those gold-rimmed glasses for even a trace of apology. There was none. Leo was the first to react. He grabbed my arm and whispered for me not to do anything rash. I shook his hand off, smiled at Victor, and said, "Uncle Victor, let Serena tell me herself." Victor sighed. That sigh was filled with so much pity that it hurt worse than a slap across the face. "Serena is not coming." He turned and left immediately after saying those words. The people from Serena's side began to follow him out. The crowd in the Rose Ballroom receded like a tide. As they passed me, some stared at their phones, some pretended to make calls, and some simply looked me over openly, their eyes practically spelling out, "I knew it." I stood there, and the tailored suit on my body suddenly felt as ill-fitting as someone else's clothes. My mother started crying. My father stood up to confront Victor's people but was held back by my uncle. Leo scrambled to usher my relatives out. The entire scene was as chaotic as a street market. Innie turned to look at the big screen. The names Ethan and Serena were still glowing there side by side like a pair of jokes. The hotel manager approached me gingerly to ask if they should still serve the wedding cake. Innie said nothing. Leo handled it for me. Innie walked outside the hall and my phone buzzed. It was a message from Serena's best friend and business partner, Vivian. It was a single sentence. "Ethan, you are not good enough for her." I shoved the phone back into my pocket and sat down on the hotel's front steps. My tie was loosened, and my bow tie had been torn off somewhere along the way. Leo sat down next to me and offered me a cigarette. Innie did not smoke, but I took it anyway. "Something about this is not right," Leo said. Innie stayed silent. Serena was the CEO of Stellar Tech. She took that position at 26, and when Victor handed her the company, the entire financial media reported on it. She was sharp, aggressive, and always knew exactly what she wanted. Innie had been with her for 3 years. From the initial awe to getting used to it to eventually discussing marriage, I always thought it was love. But looking back now, that expression she had when she said yes to my proposal, her gaze drifting past my face to land on her phone, was exactly the same expression Victor had on his face when he patted my shoulder today, in pity. At 11 o'clock that night, I returned alone to the apartment we had shared for 2 years. The place was littered with traces of her. Her clothes were still in the closet, and her skincare products were still on the bathroom counter. But I knew she would not come back. She had made her decision, and her decisions never changed. Innie opened the fridge and took out everything I could drink. In-beer, red wine, and half a bottle of brandy that had been opened who knows when. Innie sat on the living room floor, my back against the sofa, and drank one after another. The TV was on, but muted. The light from the screen illuminated the empty living room. At 3 in the morning, I was completely drunk. Innie picked up my phone and opened the chat with Serena. The last message was from her 3 days ago, asking me to confirm the details of the wedding venue decoration. 3 days ago, she was still asking me about the wedding details. 3 days later, she did not even show her face. My fingers were shaking as I typed out the words one by one. Serena, you won today. I became the biggest joke in front of the entire city. Are you satisfied? 3 years of feelings, and in your eyes it was just a chip to be weighed. Since you want to play, I will play this game with you to the end. Starting tomorrow, you will regret every decision you made today. Sent. Innie tossed the phone onto the floor and tilted my head back to pour the last mouthful of brandy down my throat. My phone buzzed almost simultaneously. Innie looked down, and the alcohol in my system sobered up by half in an instant. Innie had not sent that message to Serena. Innie had sent it to the wrong person. The name at the top of the chat window read a single word: Lucian. The moment I saw that name, Lucian, it was as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. Who was Lucian? There was not a single person in the business world who did not know that name. He was the founder of Lucian Capital, a man with a net worth in the hundreds of billions, whose investment empire stretched across real estate, technology, and finance. The financial media always used words like predator and chess master in their headlines about him. Even Serena had to respectfully call him Mr. Lucian. Victor would bend over to shake his hand first. How did I even have his number in my phone? That thought only flashed for a second before I suppressed it, because the much bigger problem right now was that I had just sent that message to him. Serena, you won. Starting tomorrow, you will regret every decision you made today. I, a loser who could barely hold down a real job, had just sent a threat-laced drunken rant to one of the top 10 financial magnates in the country. Innie frantically tried to recall the message, but it had already been over 2 minutes. Innie tried to explain typing a few words and deleting all of them because I did not even know what to say. Admit I sent it to the wrong person. Say I was drunk. Innie explained that I meant to send it to his business partner, Serena, threatening to make her regret her entire life. Any explanation would be asking for death. Innie put the phone face down on the coffee table. The alcohol was hitting hard and my head felt like it was filled with lead. Innie told myself to stop thinking. Innie had sent it, and that was that. Innie would sober up tomorrow, apologize, block the number, and we would never cross paths again. A man like Lucian was busy around the clock. He probably would not even read messages from an unknown number. Clinging to this self-deceptive hope, I collapsed on the couch and fell into a drunken sleep. I do not know how much time passed before my phone rang. I fumbled for it in a daze. The screen showed an unfamiliar number, but the last 4 digits were 4 8s. A number sequence like that could not be bought with just money. You had to be at a level of wealth to even qualify for it. I hesitated for 5 seconds before picking up. Ethan. It was a man's voice on the other end. His tone was deep, and his pace unhurried, but every word was hammered into my eardrums like a nail. This is Lucian. I sobered up completely in an instant. Innie shot up from the couch, cleared my throat, and tried to make my voice sound less like a loser who had just been dumped at his own wedding and then drank an entire bottle of brandy. Mr. Lucian, about that message just now. I read it. He cut me off, his voice betraying no emotion. Are you free right now? I am at the Horizon Suite at the Zenith Club. Come over. It was not a question. It was a statement. He hung up immediately after saying it, leaving me absolutely no room to refuse. Innie stood in the living room holding my phone, a chill climbing up from the soles of my feet in the early morning. The Zenith Club was the most exclusive private club in the city, with a rumored $2 million initiation fee. Even Victor could only afford a silver card membership, and the Horizon Suite was the floor of the club that was never open to the public. Lucian was not sleeping at 3 in the morning. He had read my mistaken threat of a message, and now he was summoning me to meet him. In the best-case scenario, perhaps he wanted to confirm there was a misunderstanding. In the worst-case scenario, I could not even imagine what that would be. because my knowledge of Lucian was limited to the almost mythical reports in the financial news. Ine washed my face, changed into clean clothes, and took a taxi to the Zenith Club. The doorman's eyes held a clear hint of scrutiny. Just as I was about to announce my name, a man in a black suit walked out and gave me a slight nod. "Mr. Ethan, Mr. Lucian is waiting for you." He led me through the lobby and swiped a card to access a private elevator. The elevator ascended with no audible button clicks, so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. The Horizon Suite was an entire private floor. In floor-to-ceiling windows faced the skyline of the entire city. The city lights spread out beneath my feet in the early hours like a shattered mirror. Lucian was sitting on a sofa by the window. In front of him was a pot of tea and 2 cups. In person, he looked a bit younger than he did on magazine covers, maybe around 40, but his eyes made you completely ignore his age. The way he looked at people was very unique. It was not the condescending scrutiny of Victor, nor the uncomfortably sharp assessment of Serena. Lucian looked at you as if he had already seen right through you, but chose not to say it, waiting for you to reveal your own flaws. "Sit," he gestured to the seat across from him. I sat down, my back ramrod straight, my fingers unconsciously gripping my knees. Lucian poured a cup of tea and pushed it toward me. The tea in the white porcelain cup was a brilliant green, steaming gently. Ine took a sip. It was so bitter I almost frowned, but I managed to hold it in. "That message," he began, leaning back against the sofa, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. "Who was it originally meant for?" I answered honestly. "Serena." He did not look surprised at all. He just nodded as if he had already guessed. "I received an invitation to today's wedding." Lucian picked up his own cup and took a slow, deliberate sip. "But I did not go. I never attend events that are destined to go wrong." That sentence made me look up. Destined to go wrong? What did he know? Lucian put down his cup and looked at me, his gaze as calm as a deep pool of water. "Ethan, do you know why her family wanted to hold this wedding today? When Serena agreed to marry me, I thought it was because of feelings." I paused and let out a bitter laugh. "Now I know. It is probably because I was easy to humiliate." Lucian smiled. It was an extremely brief, faint smile, the corner of his mouth curving up once before retracting. He said, "You are overestimating your own importance and seriously underestimating her family." He pulled a folder out from under the coffee table and pushed it toward me. I opened it. Inside was an equity structure chart dated 6 months ago. On the shareholder list of Stellar Tech, next to the column for Serena's shareholding percentage, there was a note circled in red. Lucian Capital intends to acquire 33% of Stellar Tech shares. Closing condition: Serena must complete a change in her personal marital status before the signing of the agreement. I knew every word, but I had to read the sentences 3 times in a row to truly understand what they meant. Lucian Capital wanted to invest in Stellar Tech, but there was one condition: Serena had to get married. This agreement was negotiated in March of this year. Lucian's voice came from across the table, unhurried and steady. "Serena communicated with my team for 6 months. All terms were agreed upon, only this one clause. She kept delaying and delaying." I raised my head to look at him. "What does that mean?" "It means," Lucian said, picking up the teapot and refilling my cup, "that she needed a groom to close this deal, and you happened to be the most suitable candidate. In no background, easy to control, hopelessly devoted to her. And once the deal was done, she could kick you aside at any moment." The tea inside the white porcelain cup was still rippling. I realized it was because my hand was trembling. March to September, 6 whole months. She was negotiating a multi-billion-dollar investment with Lucian while planning a wedding with me. I thought she worked overtime because of the company. I thought her occasional absent-mindedness was just fatigue. I thought those meetings I accidentally stumbled upon were just her being under too much work pressure. It was all an act. "Then why are you telling me all this?" I asked Lucian, my voice hoarse and foreign to my own ears. Lucian stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to me. The city lights outside reflected on him, outlining his silhouette like a shadow puppet. because Serena not showing up to the wedding today means she has breached the contract. He turned around to face me. Lucian Capital will not invest this money. Stellar Tech's cash flow will soon break. Invicta has been cooking the books at Wen Group's headquarters for years, and someone is already investigating it. He walked back to stand in front of me, looking down from above. In the dim light, his eyes were like two cold stars. So, Ethan, your message was right. Starting tomorrow, Serena will indeed regret it. He paused. But you cannot do it alone. You need someone who can play this game of chess with you. After Lucian said that, the Horizon suite fell into a long silence. Innie sat on that sofa, which was supposedly worth $200,000, and replayed all the moments from the past 3 years with Serena in my mind. The day she agreed to marry me. She did take a very long phone call before coming back, and there was a light in her eyes I had never seen before. At the time, I thought it was emotion. Now I knew it was relief. She had finally found a suitable groom to present as her final deliverable. Mr. Lucian, I spoke up, my voice more steady than I expected. You did not ask me here just to tell me this, did you? Lucian sat back down opposite me and poured himself another cup of tea, his movements calm and unhurried. Everything he did carried a certain assured rhythm, as if all the time in the world belonged to him. I need someone who is familiar with the inner workings of her family and Stellar Tech. He looked at me, his gaze level. You spent 3 years at Serena's side. You know far more than you think you do. I fell silent. He was right. For 3 years, although Serena never discussed company secrets with me directly, she never avoided taking work calls at home. The list of senior executives at Stellar Tech, the supply chain, several key decisions Victor made at Wen Group headquarters, even the private complaints she and Vivian made about their clients. I had heard it all. At the time, I thought it was trust. I thought it meant there were no secrets between us. Now I knew she simply never saw me as a threat. You want me to help you go after them? I asked directly. Lucian smiled again. This time, the smile had a little more warmth, but it was still very faint. He said, "It is not you helping me, it is us taking what we each need." He stood up and walked to the wall, and he did not see what switch he pressed, but the entire wall turned into a massive digital screen. What it displayed made me gasp sharply. It was a complete set of Stellar Tech's financial data. Every column was marked with a specific date and amount, precise to 2 decimal places. To meet my investment conditions, Serena has been quite busy cooking the books over the past 6 months. Lucian pointed to a section of data highlighted in red on the screen. She prematurely recognized Stellar Tech's 4th quarter revenue, inflating the revenue stream by nearly $200 million. If the SEC catches wind of this, she will not be the only one going to prison. The entire Wen Group will be dragged down with her. Do you have proof? I never speak of things without proof. Lucian pressed a button on a remote, and a bank transaction record popped up on the screen. This money was moved by Victor from Wen Group headquarters using a shell for a related party transaction. He thought he had covered his tracks perfectly, but I traced it back to the source. I stared at those figures, my heartbeat accelerating. Not from fear, but from a kind of excitement I had never felt before. For 3 years, I had always been the one receiving charity in front of Serena. Her friends called me a freeloader. Her family thought I was not good enough. Even after being stood up at the wedding, her best friend could send a text just to twist the knife. Now the trigger was in my hand. What do you need me to do? I asked. First, join Lucian Capital. Lucian turned off the screen and turned to face me. I will give you an official identity and sufficient resources. Your first step is to sort out every single transaction Serena has handled in the past 6 months, as detailed as possible. Why me? I could not help but ask. You must have more professional people under you. Lucian walked up to me, close enough that I could make out the subtle pattern on his shirt cuff. He said, because none of them have the experience of being publicly dumped at the altar by Serena. That sentence was like a needle, precisely stabbing into my most painful spot, but he was right. No one wanted to drag her family down from the clouds more than I did. No one wanted to see Serena bow her head more than I did. This kind of hatred could not be bought with money. It was a driving force no professional team could ever replicate. I will give you 24 hours to think it over. Lucian pulled a business card from the inner pocket of his suit and placed it on the coffee table. But in your heart, you already have an answer. He left immediately after saying that. The sound of his leather shoes on the marble floor was steady and powerful, fading away into the distance. Inai sat alone in the horizon suite. The skyline outside the window to the east was already beginning to pale. The city lights were slowly dimming in the dawn light, like a grand performance finally coming to its end. Inai picked up the business card. On a pure black background was a single line of silver lettering, Lucian, and a phone number. In no title, no company name. In as if the name itself was enough to say everything. When I walked out of the Zenith Club, the first rays of morning sunlight hit my face. My phone buzzed. It was Leo. His voice was hoarse. It was obvious he had been up all night. "Bro, are you okay?" Inai called all night and you did not pick up. "I thought you..." "I'm fine." I cut him off. "Leo, I need you to look into someone for me." "Who?" "Vivian, Zarina's best friend, the partner at Stellar Tech. I want to know everything about her background, as much detail as possible." Leo was silent for 2 seconds before saying, "Okay, but you have to tell me what you are about to do." I looked at the increasing flow of traffic on the road. The morning wind poured into my collar, cold enough to keep a man clear-headed. I am going to make Serena realize that not coming to the wedding today was the biggest mistake of her entire life. I hung up and took a cab back to my apartment. When we passed the St. Regis Hotel, I saw workers dismantling the wedding sign at the entrance. The sign that read the wedding of Ethan and Serena was thrown on the ground as 2 workers heaved it into a recycling cart. Inai told the driver to stop. Inai got out and picked up the sign. It was made of crystal, its edges already cracked from the fall. Inai flipped it over. On the back was a sticky note left by the hotel staff. Paid by the groom's side, do not mix with the bride's bill. Even this sign was paid for with my own money. Inai tore off the note, tucked the sign under my arm and got back into the car. When I got home, I took a shower and washed off the stench of booze and champagne. In the mirror, my eyes were slightly red, but my gaze had changed. That meek, fawning, overly cautious expression I had worn for 3 years, constantly afraid of offending her family, was gone. Inai changed into a clean suit and called Lucian. It was picked up after 2 rings. "Mr. Lucian, there is no need to wait 24 hours, I said. I'm giving you my answer now. Go ahead." "I am in." On the other end of the line, Lucian seemed to let out a small laugh. His voice remained in that steady, unhurried rhythm. 2 o'clock this afternoon, the 48th floor of Lucian Capital Tower. Inai will be waiting. After hanging up, I sat on the sofa and opened the chat window from which Serena had blocked me. Inai sent one final message. "Serena, you taught me one thing. Feelings can be acted out, but debts always have to be repaid." After sending it, I deleted all her contact information. 3 years and 4 months of chat history. Over 2,000 photos, all memories of her. Cleared with a single tap. The moment the phone screen went dark, I saw my own reflection on it, smiling slightly. It was not a bitter smile. It was the kind of excitement one feels after waiting a long time for the game to finally begin. At 1:45 in the afternoon, Lucian Capital Tower. The moment the elevator doors opened on the 48th floor, the panoramic city view behind an entire wall of glass hit me all at once. It was completely different from what I had seen at the Zenith Club in the morning. From this height, the entire financial district was beneath my feet. The traffic moved slowly like a colony of ants. A female assistant in a professional suit was already waiting at the elevator. She said to me, "Mr. Ethan, Mr. Lucian is waiting for you in the conference room." I followed her through the open-plan office area. Everyone's gaze swept over me. Inai was not sure if I was imagining it, but those gazes carried something very subtle, as if they all knew who I was and what had happened to me. The conference room door swung open. 5 or 6 people sat on both sides of a long table. Lucian sat in the chairman's seat, a laptop open in front of him. Everyone, Lucian's voice was not loud, but the entire room fell silent instantly. "Let me introduce Ethan. Starting today, He joins the strategic investment department at Lucian Capital, responsible for the due diligence work on the Stellar Tech project. A middle-aged man wearing glasses frowned. Mr. Lucian, the onboarding process for the strategic investment department. It is waived. Lucian did not even look at him. His gaze swept over everyone present. I have made my decision. No one else in the room made a sound. Lucian gestured for me to come over and sit in the first chair to his left. That seat was usually reserved for the vice president. As I sat down, I could feel several gazes stabbing into me like knives. But I did not care, because I saw the documents spread out on the conference table. The first page was the organizational chart of Stellar Tech. Serena's photo was printed in the column marked CEO. Next to it were her shareholding percentages and information on her associated companies. In that photo, she was wearing a black blazer, her chin slightly raised, the corner of her mouth carrying her signature smile. Confident, cool, and untouchable. I stared at that photo, and there was only one thought in my head. Serena, the spotlight on your stage is about to go dark. The onboarding paperwork was completed that very afternoon. Lucian's assistant was named Claire. She was in her early 30s, wore rimless glasses, and spoke and acted with impeccable precision. After she had me sign the last non-disclosure agreement, she handed me a craft paper envelope. Mr. Inthan, inside is the material Mr. Lucian had me prepare in advance. Please have a look. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of printed documents. The top page was a record of Stellar Tech's equity changes over the past 6 months. Serena's name was followed by a series of complex operations, some of which I could understand, others requiring a professional background. Let me know if you have any questions. Claire left right after she said that. I was left alone in the conference room. Lucian had gone to another meeting. Before he left, he said one thing to me. After you finish reading these, you will know why you were chosen. I did not pay too much attention to that sentence at the time, but when I flipped to the 7th page, the pen in my hand dropped onto the table. It was a record of private email correspondence between Serena and Victor, spanning from January to August of this year. As I read line by line, my blood slowly ran cold. January 15th. Victor sent to Serena. Lucian Capital places a high value on the marital status of its management. Your single status needs to be resolved as soon as possible. January 16th, Serena replied, I know, I am already scouting. Scouting. That word was like a rusty knife slowly twisting in my stomach. January 16th. By then, we had already been together for over 2 years. What she told her father was, I am already scouting. Not I have a boyfriend. Not we are considering marriage. It was like she was picking out a suitable piece of furniture. In scouting, Inni kept flipping through the pages. March 2nd, Serena sent to Victor. Let us go with Ethan. He has no background, a soft personality, and is easy to control. The wedding will be set for September. It will be just in time before the agreement is signed. March 3rd, Victor replied, Are you sure he will not ruin things? Serena's reply was only 3 words.
He cannot flip the table.
He cannot flip the table. I stared at those 3 words for a full 5 minutes. Outside, the glass curtain wall of Lucian Capital Tower reflected the harsh afternoon sunlight. The air conditioning was on full blast in the conference room, but my back was drenched in sweat. 3 years. Inni cooked for her for 3 years. When she worked late, I drove to pick her up. When she drank too much at business dinners, I stayed up all night looking after her. On her birthdays, I saved up for half a year to buy her that brand of handbag she liked. When her mother was sick and hospitalized, I got to the hospital even before she did. I thought that was what it meant to love someone. I thought she was just not good at expressing herself. It turns out in her eyes I was just a pet that could never flip the table. Inni took a deep breath and spread out all the remaining documents. Behind them were Stellar Tech's financial details, supplier contracts, and a board meeting memo marked confidential. Vivian's name appeared frequently within. Her role was the CFO of Stellar Tech. All capital flows had to pass through her hands. Leo's call came in at that moment. Bro, I looked into that Vivian you asked about. Inni found her. His voice was low and tense. This woman is not simple. She holds the title of CFO at Stellar Tech, but she also has 3 other companies under her name. One of them has a massive amount of capital flow with Victor's Wen Group headquarters. I had a friend in auditing take a look. Those accounts, are they problematic? More than problematic. Leo paused. There is a high suspicion of money laundering. Wen Group headquarters has looked impressive on the surface these past 2 years, but their cash flow has actually had problems for a while now. Victor has been robbing Peter to pay Paul. If Stellar Tech could get that investment from Lucian Capital, it could just fill the hole. If they do not get it, what will happen? In 3 months, at the fastest, their capital chain will snap. I closed my eyes. All the fragments in my brain began to piece themselves together into a complete picture. Serena desperately needed Lucian's investment. Lucian's investment condition was that she had to get married. So she chose me, the tool man who could not flip the table. The wedding was set for September. Lucian Capital's funds were to arrive in October. Everything was arranged flawlessly. But why did Serena bail at the very last moment? If she had just shown up at the wedding, the agreement would have been in effect and the money would have been in place. She was not stupid. She would not let it all fail at the final step, unless someone made her change her mind. I flipped to the very last document. It was a screenshot of an instant messaging chat log. The date was 3 days before the wedding. The conversation was between Serena and Vivian. Vivian said, "Are you sure you want to marry him? Lucian is a shrewd man. Even after you are married, he will still audit your books. When he discovers those holes, you will end up in prison before the money even arrives." Serena said, "We will stall as long as we can. Get the money first, then talk." Vivian said, "How about this? Do not go to the wedding that day. I will arrange for people to spread the word that Ethan was seeing someone else. You stall for a month. When Lucian's side starts pressing harder, we will figure something out." Serena took a long time before replying. "Fine, just one word." Then, on September 16th, the day of the wedding, Serena did not show up. Her assistant Zoe stammered on the phone. Victor patted my shoulder in public and said Serena needs more time to think it over. Vivian sent me that message saying, "You are not good enough for her." Everything had been designed in advance. The broken engagement was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a script, and in this script, I was not even a supporting character. I was a disposable prop. The conference room door was pushed open. Lucian walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of me and glanced at the documents spread out on the table. "Did you finish reading everything?" "Finished," I said. My voice was much calmer than I had expected. Lucian sat down across from me, took a sip of his coffee and said, "Serena's biggest mistake was not the financial fraud, and it was not running out on the wedding." "What was it?" "It was thinking you really could not flip the table." He looked at me with an assessing gaze, as if evaluating an asset he was about to bet on. I met his gaze without flinch. "Mr. Lucian, I need 3 things." "Name them." "The complete supplier list and all contract details for Stellar Tech, the audit reports for Wen Group headquarters from the last 3 years, and..." I picked up Serena's photo from the table and flipped it face down. "The bank transaction records for those 3 companies under Vivian." Lucian looked at me for 3 seconds. The corner of his mouth slowly curved into a faint smile. He pressed a button on the intercom on the table. "Claire, pull all the materials Miss Ethan needs. Put them on an expedited track." Claire's voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Lucian, the audit reports for Wen Group headquarters need to go through the regulatory process. It could take a week." "Just get them to Mr. Ethan. I will handle the process." Lucian hung up and looked at me. "Within 3 days, everything will be in your hands. That will be enough." I stood up and organized the scattered documents on the table, putting them back into the craft paper envelope. Lucian suddenly stopped me. "Ethan, have you considered a question?" "What question?" "Serena chose you because it proves you were indeed easy to control. Your feelings for her over these 3 years were real. Now that I'm asking you to personally send her to prison, can you actually go through with it?" I tucked the envelope under my arm and looked out the window at the skyline of the financial district. The sun was already starting to set in the west. Golden rays of light struck the glass of the building opposite, so bright it was hard to keep my eyes open. Mr. Lucian, she taught me something.
What is that?
Feelings. Using them once is called sincerity. Using them twice is called infatuation. Using them a third time, I turned around and gave him a small smile, is just called stupidity. Just as I walked out of Lucian Capital Tower, my phone buzzed. An unknown number sent me a text. The content was only one line. Ethan, I heard you joined Lucian Capital. The sender ID showed Vivian. Innie did not reply. I saved the number to my contacts. In the notes field, I typed 2 words, the next one. Then I shoved my phone back into my pocket and walked into the September night breeze. 3 days later, everything I had asked for was in my hands. When Claire walked into my office holding a stack of folders, I was in the middle of taping a giant sheet of whiteboard paper to the wall. She placed the files on the desk, pushed up her glasses and said, "Mr. Ethan, all 47 supplier contracts from Stellar Tech are here. The electronic version of Wen Group headquarters audit reports from the last 3 years has been sent to your email. The bank transaction records for the 3 companies under Vivian's name, Mr. Lucian personally made a call. The bank just sent them over. Thank you." I opened the first contract without looking up. Claire stood there for a while, not leaving. I looked up at her. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Mr. Then, I have worked at Lucian Capital for 6 years. I have never seen Mr. Lucian open so many green lights for a newcomer. Please do not let him down." She left right after saying that. Innie stared at the closed door, fully understanding what Claire meant. The entire Lucian Capital was watching me. Everyone was waiting to see if this man who had been publicly dumped by Serena was here for revenge, or just to become another joke. I spent the entire night spreading out all the materials, sorting them and cross-referencing them. My whiteboard was filled with arrows and notes. A red marker was used for problem nodes, a blue one for key players, and a black one for timelines. By the time the sun rose, the entire wall had turned into a densely packed web. Then I saw the thing that was enough to flip the entire table. Wen Group headquarters had an accounts payable entry for $30 million. The recipient was a company called Golden Link Trading, registered in a small town in New Jersey. On its own, there was nothing wrong with this entry. But in the private company transaction records of Vivian, I found the same Golden Link Trading on the same day, moving $30 million in the opposite direction. Funds left Wen Group headquarters, entered Golden Link Trading, then went from Golden Link Trading into Vivian's company, and finally flowed from Vivian's company into 3 different private accounts. The holder of one of those accounts was surnamed Wen. Big Victor. Innie leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The father-in-law was laundering money through his daughter-in-law's best friend's company, and was planning to use Lucian's investment to fill the hole. If this whole scheme had been set up by Serena, I would actually have to admire her. But knowing Victor's level of intelligence, he probably had no idea his own daughter had been dragged through the mud by her best friend. My phone rang. Lucian sent a message. 9 o'clock. My office. I washed my face, changed my shirt, and went up to the 48th floor with a photo of my whiteboard. The door to Lucian's office was open. Besides him, there were 2 other people inside. One was Marcus, the director of the Strategic Investment Department, the middle-aged man with glasses I had met a few times. The other man I had not met before. He was in his early 40s, wearing a grey suit, his expression as cold as a slab of iron. "Let me introduce you." Lucian pointed at the man in grey. "Nolan, the director of the legal department, and you have already met Marcus." Nolan looked at me without any pleasantries and asked directly, "What do you have?" I connected my phone to the projector and threw the photo of the whiteboard onto the wall-sized screen. Nolan and Marcus both fell silent at the same time. Lucian leaned back in his chair, slowly twirling a teacup between his fingers. I started from Golden Link Trading. Innie explained the flow of the $30 million, the private account of Victor, the role Vivian played in the middle of it all, and finally arrived at the financial fraud of Stellar Tech. The $200 million in revenue that Serena had recognized prematurely, The source of that money was none other than the money Victor had moved from Wen Group headquarters. They used fake revenue to inflate Stellar Tech's valuation. They used the high valuation to attract Lucian Capital's investment. Then, they would use Lucian Capital's money to repay Wen Group headquarters' debts. I connected the final line. This is a closed loop. Without Lucian Capital's money, this entire loop would blow up within 3 to 6 months. The conference room fell silent for a full 10 seconds. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice filled with clear shock. So Serena broke off the engagement because she was afraid Mr. Lucian would audit the books after the wedding. Wrong. Nolan cut him off, his gaze fixed intently on the capital flowchart on the screen. She broke it off because Vivian told her that even after the wedding, Lucian Capital would still audit the books. In by then, before the money even arrived, she would end up in prison. Serena was not unwilling to get married. She did not dare to. Lucian suddenly laughed. He laughed very softly, but the atmosphere in the entire conference room shifted because of it. Marcus did not dare to make a sound. Even Nolan straightened up slightly in his seat. Ethan, Lucian placed his teacup on the table with a crisp click. If I let you make the decision right now, what would be your first move? I did not hesitate. Public opinion. Explain. The bank transaction records from Vivian's 3 companies, plus the accounts payable records from Wen Group headquarters, both sets of material will be anonymously sent to the financial media. Let the news ferment first. Wen Group's stock price will definitely drop. When they are all scrambling in panic, we will make our move. Nolan frowned. The risk of an anonymous leak is too high. If it is traced back. It will not be traced back. Lucian cut him off, his tone confident. If the legal team at Lucian Capital is just a bunch of freeloaders, then there is no need for them to exist. Nolan said nothing further. Lucian turned back to me. What is your second step? Among Stellar Tech's supplier list, 7 of them are Vivian's connected companies. Their procurement prices are all at least 30% above the market average. Serena personally signed these contracts. She cannot shift the responsibility. After the public opinion fire is lit, we will throw these 7 contracts out and let the flames spread directly to Serena. Marcus sucked in a sharp breath next to me. He knew what this meant. Once those 7 contracts were made public, Serena's professional career would be completely over. Not only would she lose her position as the CEO of Stellar Tech, she would even face criminal charges for commercial fraud. Lucian looked at me with an unreadable expression. It was not admiration, and it was not praise. It was more like confirmation. Confirmation that his bet was placed on the right man. The third step, I continued on my own. Once Wen Group's stock price drops to a certain level, Lucian Capital will step in to acquire. There will be no need for a premium. They will be begging us to take over. How much time do you need? 1 month. Lucian stood up and walked over to me. He was about the same height as I was, but just standing there gave off an oppressive force that made you want to look up at him. He extended his hand and said, 1 month from now, I do not want to hear the Wen family name ever mentioned in the business world again. I shook his hand. Deal. At 8 o'clock that same evening, the first anonymous email was sent to the tip lines of 3 major financial media outlets. By 7 o'clock the next morning, the story of Wen Group headquarters' financial irregularities was trending online. At 10 o'clock, Wen Group's stock price opened directly down by 8%. At 12:30, my phone rang. A number I had deleted but not blocked flashed on the screen. Serena, and I let it ring for a very long time. Only at the very last second did I pick up. On the other end was the sound of her rapid breathing and a cacophony of ringing phones in her office. It sounded like utter chaos. Ethan. Serena's voice still carried that condescending tone, but I detected a trace of something I had never heard before. Panic. Are you at Lucian Capital? She asked. Yes. That report in the financial media, was that you? I leaned back in my chair and looked at the afternoon sunlight reflecting off the Lucian Capital tower outside the window. My tone was very casual. Ms. Serena, I am just a man who cannot flip the table. How could I have the ability to create such a huge news story? There was silence on the other end of the line, in a very long silence. Then Serena said something, her voice low, as if she had squeezed the words out through clenched teeth. "Ethan, let us meet." I looked at the photo of the whiteboard on my desk. Every arrow, every note, all pointing in the same direction. "Fine," I said. "Come find me at Lucian Capital." The day Serena came to Lucian Capital, it was the heaviest rainstorm since the beginning of autumn. Inai had informed the front desk downstairs beforehand to have her wait in the conference room on the 48th floor. When Claire messaged me to say Serena had arrived, I was in the middle of checking Stellatech's supplier list with Marcus. Marcus glanced at me and asked if I wanted him to come along. Inai said no, I would handle this alone. The conference room door was made of glass, and as I reached the entrance, I saw Serena at a single glance. She was sitting on the sofa, wearing a cream-colored trench coat, and her hair was pinned up perfectly, and her makeup was so meticulously applied it looked like she was about to attend a press conference. But her hands gave her away. Her left hand was clutching her phone, her knuckles white. Her right hand was holding a coffee cup. In a ring of lipstick stained the rim, but she had not taken a single sip. Inai stood at the door for 3 seconds. This woman. Inai had chased her for an entire year before she agreed to be with me. We were together for 3 years. Inai cooked over 300 meals for her and stayed up with her through countless late nights. On our wedding day, I wore the suit she had chosen and waited an entire afternoon. She did not come. She had Victor pat me on the shoulder in front of everyone and say, "Ethan, Serena needs more time to think it over." She had Vivian send me a message saying, "Ethan, you are not good enough for her." And now she was sitting in the conference room of my company, waiting to see me. Inai pushed open the door and walked in. Serena looked up at me and her expression shifted. The shift was so fast that if I had not spent 3 years with her, I would never have noticed. She instinctively started to stand up, ready to look down on me condescendingly as she always did. Then she realized where she was. This was Lucian Capital. The man sitting behind the desk was me. She did not stand up. "Ethan." When she called my full name, it was still in that tone, cool, assessing, laced with a hint of impatience. But I could hear the slight tremble at the end. "Miss Serena." I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, placing a document on the table without opening it. "What brings you here?" "Stop pretending." Serena put down her coffee cup and stared at me. "You were the one who leaked that report to the financial media. Do you have proof?" "I do not need proof." Her voice rose by half a pitch. She realized she was losing her composure and took a deep breath to press it down. "Ethan, I know you are working at Lucian Capital now. I also know why Lucian recruited you. He wants to take down my family, and he is using you as his weapon. But have you ever thought about who actually ends up in prison if you uncover something? You and your father." I said it very calmly, as if I was commenting on the weather. Serena's face changed color. That condescending composure she always wore finally cracked. Through that crack, I saw the real her, frightened, anxious, and completely out of options. "Ethan." She suddenly switched to a more intimate address, her voice softening. "Can we not drag the companies into what happened between us? Inai, no, I went too far on the wedding day. Inai can explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off. "Explain how you told your father in March that Ethan has no background, a soft personality, and is easy to control. Or explain how you and Vivian conspired 3 days before the wedding on how to break off the engagement and throw mud on my name." Serena's pupils suddenly contract. "How do you?" She swallowed the rest of the sentence halfway through, but it was already too late. Her expression shifted from shock to fear because she realized I knew far more than just the events of the wedding day. Inai had gotten my hands on all her hidden cards. The $30 million from Wen Group headquarters went through the shell of Golden Link Trading. Golden Link Trading transferred the money to Vivian. Vivian transferred it to your father's personal account. I opened the document in front of me and pushed it toward her. "Would you like to see these bank records for yourself?" Serena did not look at them. She did not need to. She had personally handled all of these matters. Her fingers began to tremble, not from the cold, but because she finally understood. The man sitting in front of her was no longer the Ethan who would drive out in the middle of the night to pick her up from work. "How much do you want?" she suddenly asked. Inai froze for a moment. "Money," Serena bit her lip. Her expression reminded me of what Lucian had once said. When a person is backed into a corner, they make the stupidest decisions. Name your price. Sell me the source files. Take the money, resign, and leave this city. We will pretend none of this ever happened. I looked at her for a long time. Serena. The always condescending Serena who thought she could control everything. She was trying to buy me off with money, using her family's money to buy off the useless man who could never flip the table. Ms. Serena, I said, you're forgetting one thing.
What?
I'm currently working at Lucian Capital. The annual salary Lucian gives me starts at 8 figures, and that is not even counting the project bonuses. I leaned back in my chair and looked at her. That few tens of millions of yours I really could not care less about. The last layer of Serena's composure shattered. She stood up. The movement was too abrupt, and her knee hit the coffee table. The coffee cup wobbled and almost fell over. She ignored it, staring at me hard. Her lips moved for a long time before she finally squeezed out a sentence. Ethan, are you really going to be this ruthless? I am ruthless? I finally laughed, the sound actually coming out. Serena, when you turned me into a joke in front of the entire city on our wedding day, why did you not ask if you were being ruthless? When your best friend sent me a message telling me to get out of this city, why did you not ask if she was being ruthless? I stood up, placed my hands on the coffee table, and looked at her up close. 3 years of feelings burned to ashes in that single instant. In the ashes, only a single cold thought remained. Do you remember something you said to your father? Serena took half a step backward. He cannot flip the table. I enunciated every single word. You thought I could not flip the table. But Serena, the place you are standing right now is the 48th floor of Lucian Capital Tower. The lifeblood of your family is in my hands. Tell me, has the table been flipped or not? She said nothing. She turned around and left. Her high heels clicked on the marble floor of the corridor, the sound fast and frantic, a complete departure from the steady rhythm she had arrived with. I stood at the door of the conference room and watched her go. When she reached the elevator, she stumbled and had to reach out and brace herself against the wall. Just before the elevator doors closed, she looked back at me one last time. That look I will remember for the rest of my life. Resentment, rage, fear, and perhaps a trace of regret. But whatever it was, it no longer had anything to do with me. Claire came out from the office next door, holding 2 cups of coffee. She looked in the direction of the elevator, then back at me. Mr. Ethan, Ms. Serena looked absolutely terrible when she left. What did you say to her? Nothing much. I took the coffee she offered and took a sip. I just settled an old debt with her. An old debt. Something I lent out 3 years ago. I asked for it back today. Claire did not press further, but I could tell from her eyes that she had probably guessed. The people in the strategic investment department at Lucian Capital were all sharp as tacks. The situation with Stellar Tech had blown up so much that everyone in the company had heard the rumors. When I got back to my office, Marcus was still waiting for me. Spread out in front of him was the audit report for Wen Group headquarters. His expression was grim. Ethan, look at this. He pushed a document toward me. I flipped through it. It was the cash flow monitoring data for Wen Group headquarters from the last 3 months. Invicta, perhaps having caught wind of something, had been frantically moving assets in recent days. Several confirmed accounts receivable had suddenly been reclassified as bad debt provisions. The amounts added up to over $500 million. He is securing an escape route for himself. Marcus pushed up his glasses. If Wen Group collapses, this money would be enough for him to live comfortably abroad for a long time. Does he know we are about to make a move? Marcus shook his head. Not necessarily that we are about to make a move. It looks more like someone is tipping him off. I thought for 3 seconds and pressed the intercom. Claire, check who was the first person Serena contacted after she left Lucian Capital today. 3 minutes later, Claire replied. Her voice carried an unnatural pause, as if she herself could hardly believe the result. Mr. Ethan, after Ms. Serena left. Her first phone call was to Vivian. The call lasted 17 minutes. Vivian. He looked over the notes on my whiteboard again. The information on Vivian was the sparsest of all. She was like a shadow lurking behind the father and daughter. She always appeared at the most critical points, but it was very difficult to make out her own personal outline. In now, after receiving my clear signal of rejection, the very first thing Serena did was contact her. The diversion of Wen Group's fund, Victor's bad debt provisions, all the directions of their escape routes were converging on the same point. I sent Lucian a message. Mr. Lucian, the real fish is not the Wen family. It is Vivian. He replied very quickly. Understood. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring Nolan and Marcus. I put my phone face down on the desk and looked at the curtain of rain outside the window. The rain was getting heavier. The city lights were blurring into indistinct splotches of light in the mist, like an oil painting someone had splashed with water. Serena came here today to beg for her family. But what she did not know was that the best friend she was so desperately trying to protect was likely the one pushing her family off the cliff. And I, on the day of the wedding, was trembling with rage over that message Vivian sent me saying, "You are not good enough for her." Thinking about it now, it was truly laughable. Victor was moving his assets even faster than I had imagined. The next morning, when Marcus sent the latest monitoring data to my email, Wen Group headquarters had turned 2 more accounts receivable into bad debts. The amounts were not huge, just over $80 million combined, but the method of operation was exactly the same as the $30 million before. They all used the shell of Golden Link trading. He is racing against time. Marcus sat in my office, his brow tightly furrowed. It is as if someone told him that if he does not run now, it will be too late. I pulled up the transaction records of the 3 companies under Vivian's name and compared them again. As expected, I found new traces. Every single time Victor moved his assets, it was within 24 hours of a phone call between Vivian and Serena. Serena is being used as a tool. I pushed the comparison results in front of Marcus. She thinks she is helping her family. In reality, every step is being controlled by Vivian from behind the scenes. Marcus studied the papers for a long time before looking up at me. What exactly is Vivian after? I had thought about this question for a long time too. Vivian's annual salary at Stellar Tech was not low. The 3 companies under her name were operating normally. The cash flow on their books was clean. She had no reason to jump into the fire with the Wen family. Unless she was going after Wen Group headquarters from the very beginning, I said. Marcus's pupils narrowed. Are you saying she wants Wen Group? It is even worse than wanting it. I pointed to a recurring account in the transaction records. Look at this account. It is the final destination of every single fund transfer. The account holder's last name is not Vivian. It is Damien. Marcus's face changed instantly. The name Damien was not particularly famous in business circles, but a little digging would reveal that he was Vivian's older brother. He was also the biggest competitor of Wen Group headquarters, the founder and chairman of Apex Holdings. So Vivian had been buried inside Stellar Tech all these years. It was never to assist Serena. She was collecting ammunition for her brother, waiting for the right moment to blow the entire Wen Group to pieces, so Apex Holdings could pick up the pieces at a bargain price. This is no longer just a personal grudge between you and Serena. Marcus leaned back in his chair and took off his glasses to wipe them. This is a hostile takeover of Wen Group by Apex Holdings. You just happened to walk right into it. Just happened. I laughed. Marcus, Lucian did not just happen to choose me. He knows everything. Marcus fell silent. Lucian indeed knew everything. He held all the cards on Wen Group and Stellar Tech. He knew Vivian was an inside agent for Apex Holdings. He also knew I was the discarded fiancé Serena had thrown away. He chose me not only because I hated Serena, but because in this capital game, I was the one variable that could thoroughly muddy the waters. The Wen family did not believe I had the ability to fight back. Vivian would never even take me seriously. In everyone's eyes, Ethan was just that pathetic man who was publicly humiliated at his wedding, incapable of causing any real waves, and now that very pebble they thought could not cause a ripple was jammed right in the gears of the entire machine. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Claire knocked on my office door, her expression a bit strange. "Mr. Ethan, Victor is here." I raised an eyebrow. "Is he alone?" He brought Serena with him. Claire paused. Serena's eyes are red. I put down my pen and leaned back in my chair to think. Invicta had come in person, and he had brought a tearful Serena with him.
This was a scene I could never have imagined 3 years ago.
When my startup failed and I was in debt for $300,000, I had begged Victor for help. He would not even answer my calls. Now he was bringing his daughter to my doorstep, his posture lowered to the dust. "Have them wait in the conference room," I said. "Same as last time. Do not serve any tea." Claire nodded and turned to leave. I stayed in my office for an extra 15 minutes. It was not about putting on airs. It was about making myself stay calm. In an old fox like Victor, who had survived 30 years in the business world without falling, was definitely more cunning than Serena. He was here today for one of two reasons: to beg for mercy or to probe my hand. Either way, I could not let him lead me by the nose. When I pushed open the conference room door, the scene inside did surprise me a little. Victor was not sitting on the sofa. He was standing by the window, his back to the door, his shoulders slightly slumped. Serena was sitting in the corner, her head lowered, her hair covering most of her face. Her eye makeup was indeed ruined, smudged in blotches on her eyelids. She was clutching a tissue in her hand, already crumpled beyond recognition. Hearing the door open, Victor turned around. The last time I had seen him was at the wedding venue, patting my shoulder with eyes full of pity, the corner of his mouth even carrying a hint of a smile. The Victor standing in front of me now had puffy eye bags, a crooked tie, and hair that looked like it had not been dyed in days, the grey roots all showing. "Ethan." His voice was hoarse, completely lacking the condescending confidence he had a month ago. "I have come here today to apologize to you." Apologize for what? The wedding. What we did was wrong. Victor took a deep breath, his gaze shifting away. Serena is young and foolish, and as her father, I did not teach her well. If you still feel like you have not gotten your payback, name your terms. Anything. As long as it is within my power, I will agree to it. I looked at his face. This face that was once so high and mighty, that never looked me straight in the eye, was now filled with flattery and fear. But I felt no satisfaction in my heart, because I knew he was not genuinely here to apologize. He was just afraid. The assets he had transferred out were still not enough for him to live off for the rest of his life, and Lucian Capital could hand over the evidence to the regulators at any moment, robbing him of even the chance to flee. "Uncle Victor," I addressed him with the most respectful term I used to use, but my tone was completely different. "The matter of the wedding is already behind us. If that is all you came here to say today, then we have nothing further to discuss." I turned around to leave as soon as I finished speaking.
"Wait!"
Serena suddenly stood up, and her chair slid backward and slammed into the wall. She walked quickly up to me, her eyes as red as a rabbit's, her lips trembling. In a voice only the two of us could hear, she said something I never thought I would hear from her mouth in my entire life. "Ethan, I am begging you." When Serena said those words, her voice shattered like a piece of crushed glass. "I am begging you to let my father go." Her tears finally fell, splashing onto the floor. "I moved that money. I told the finance department to cook the books. I arranged the people for the handovers with Vivian. It has nothing to do with my father. Just come for me." I looked down at her without saying a word. Victor closed his eyes beside us. His entire body slumped against the window frame as if his spine had been ripped out. He probably never imagined that the daughter he had meticulously cultivated for over 20 years would take all the blame onto herself in this way. "You say it has nothing to do with your father?" I took out my phone and pulled up the screenshot, marking the capital flow to Golden Link Trading. "Serena, you know better than I do who the legal representative of Golden Link Trading is." Serena's body swayed. Every single payment from Wen Group headquarters to Golden Link Trading exceeded $20 million. Who was the approver? I flipped to the next screenshot on my phone. Your father, a chief financial officer, does not have the authority to approve a transaction of this size. Only the chairman himself can sign off on the release of funds. I was the one who told him to sign it. Serena still struggled. "Enough." Victor finally spoke. His voice was so exhausted it was unrecognizable, as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. "Serena, stop." He walked over, glanced at the documents in my hand, and then looked up at me. The pleading in his eyes was gone, leaving only emptiness. "Ethan, name your price." "What price? How much money do you want to bury these things?" I almost laughed out loud. The logic of the Wen family was truly a family tradition. Serena came last time to offer me money. Now Victor was here asking for a price. In their eyes, everything in the world could be measured with money, feelings, dignity, even the version of myself that was shattered sitting on the hotel steps on my wedding day. "Uncle Victor," I put my phone away and turned to look at him. "Do you think I still lack money now?" Victor's lips moved, but nothing came out. "I work for Lucian. Lucian Capital pays me an 8-figure annual salary to start." I repeated the same words I had said to Serena the last time she came, and then added another sentence. "And besides, is there even any money left on Wen Group headquarters books right now?" That sentence was the final knife, precisely stabbing into the most painful spot on Victor's body. His face turned paper white, his body swayed, and he had to grab the arm of the sofa to stop himself from collapsing. And Serena rushed over to support him, but he gently pushed her away. "Then what exactly do you want?" Victor's voice was filled with despair now. Innie did not answer immediately. Inai walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, my back to them. The city below was like a giant chessboard, each building a chess piece, and the man standing here right now held the step that would decide the outcome. "I want 2 things," Victor responded eagerly from behind me. "Name them." "Name them." "First, I want Serena in front of everyone to admit that she was the one who broke the engagement on the wedding day. It was not that I was not good enough for her." Silence fell behind me. Inai could hear Serena's breathing, rapid and suppressed. "Second," I turned around and looked at Victor. "You will personally sign a share transfer agreement, transferring 15% of Wen Group headquarters shares to Lucian Capital. The price will be based on the current market price. You will not be shortchanged a single cent." 15%? Victor's face twitched. "Those are my retirement shares." "Your retirement shares?" I cut him off, my tone finally stained with a bit of real coldness. "Uncle Victor, if I send this evidence to the SEC, you will not even have a retirement to go to. Think carefully." The conference room was silent for 30 full seconds. Then Victor lowered his head. His voice was old and hoarse, like a tiger that had all its teeth pulled out. "Fine, Inai will sign." Beside him, Serena covered her face, her shoulders shaking violently. She held it in and did not let out a sound. Inai glanced at her, then turned and walked out of the conference room. Claire was waiting for me in the corridor, holding a share transfer agreement that had been drafted long ago. Lucian had already signed it in advance. "Mr. Dunn." Claire handed me the agreement, glanced in the direction of the conference room and lowered her voice. "Mr. Lucian asked me to tell you that after the agreement is signed, what you choose to give back to the Wen family is for you to decide on your own." I took the agreement and weighed this document that was only a dozen pages long in my hand. It was heavier than I had imagined. "Tell Mr. Lucian I have received the item." As for what to give back to the Wen family, I pushed open the conference room door and looked back at Claire. "I have a plan in mind." The weekend after Victor signed the share transfer agreement, I had someone book the board meeting room at Wen Group headquarters. The time was set for Monday at 9 in the morning. When the notice was sent out, apart from Victor and Serena, no third person knew what this meeting was really going to be about. The board members thought it was just a routine quarterly review. The administrative department prepared the projector and meeting materials as usual, and even ordered coffee and tea. At 8:40, I arrived at the Wen Group headquarters building. Inai had come to this building countless times over the past 3 years. When I used to come, the receptionist would always look at me with an expression that said, "Why are you here again?" and make me wait in the visitor area, sometimes for up to an hour. Serena would walk out of the elevator after a meeting, see me sitting in the corner, and occasionally give an apologetic look. And more often, she would just sweep her eyes over me quickly and say, "You should head back first." Today was different. Today, Lucian Capital's car stopped directly at the main entrance of the building. Claire followed behind me, and behind her were two people from the Lucian Capital Legal Department. When the receptionist saw me, she reflexively tried to stop me. Then she saw the Lucian Capital work badge on Claire's chest, and her hand froze in midair. Mr. Inthan, the receptionist's voice was trembling slightly. Ms. Serena has not arrived yet. There is no need for her to arrive. I walked straight past her and pressed the button for the top-floor elevator. Over a dozen people were already seated in the conference room. Directors of Wen Group headquarters, the chief financial officer, the legal counsel, and a few shareholder representatives whose names I could not recall. Their expressions varied when they saw me walk in. Some were surprised, some were wary, and some instinctively looked toward the door, as if waiting for Victor to appear. I took a seat in the chairman's spot at the head of the long table. That seat had always belonged to Victor. Everyone. I connected my laptop to the projector, and the screen displayed a capital flow chart for Wen Group headquarters over the past 3 years. Today's meeting is not a quarterly review. The chief financial officer, George, stood up. Mr. Inthan, that seat is not for you to sit in. Sit down. I did not even look at him. Ini tapped a key on my keyboard and the first document popped up on the screen. The business registration information for Golden Link Trading. The legal representative column clearly displayed the name Victor Wen. His shareholding was 100%. The conference room fell silent in an instant. George's backside slowly settled back into his chair. Golden Link Trading. Registered address is an industrial park in a small town in New Jersey. Its registered capital is $500,000. Its business scope is daily miscellaneous goods. I flipped to the next page. But this company that sells daily miscellaneous goods has received a total of $120 million in accounts payable from Wen Group headquarters over the past 2 years. Whispers began to stir among the shareholder representatives. $120 million. What kind of daily miscellaneous goods can turn a listed company into a negative asset? I swept my gaze around the conference room. George, you are the CFO. You answer. George's face turned white in an instant. His lips moved for a long time, and the words that came out sounded like gravel being crushed. These contracts were directly signed by Chairman Victor. Ini did not handle them. You did not handle them, but you signed off on them. I pulled up another document and zoomed in on the signature column. This $42 million transaction. Your name is signed in the financial review column. George, did you not handle it? Or did you handle it with your eyes closed? George said nothing further. The conference room was so quiet you could hear the sound of the air conditioning vent above. In continued flipping through the pages, the second document, the third, the fourth. Each one was a payment record from Wen Group headquarters to Golden Link Trading. The amounts ranged from $8 million to $42 million, spanning 2 full fiscal years. Ini had marked the destination of every single sum with a red line. From Golden Link Trading into the 3 companies under Vivian's name. From those 3 companies, split into dozens of small transactions, finally converging into one single account. The holder of this account, I tapped on the screen, is named Damien. Does anyone know this name? A shareholder representative wearing glasses suddenly looked up. Damien from Apex Holdings. Correct. I switched to the next page. Apex Holdings, Ingren Group headquarters' biggest competitor in the East Coast market. Over the past 5 years, Apex Holdings has snatched at least 4 major clients from Wen Group in the same sector. Would anyone like to guess why Apex Holdings could always get Wen Group's price quotes in advance? No one answered. The answer was already written on everyone's faces. The legal counsel was the first to react. He adjusted his glasses, his voice tense. Mr. Inthan, are you saying that someone inside Wen Group has been leaking trade secrets to Apex Holdings? Not just leaking. I pulled up the equity structure of the 3 companies under Vivian's name. Vivian, CFO of Stellar Tech, is also the actual controller of these 3 shell companies. Over the past 2 years, through related party transactions, she has transferred funds from Wen Group headquarters to Apex Holdings. Apex Holdings then used this very money to undercut Wen Group's market share at low prices. In other words, Wen Group has been using its own money to feed its own enemy. The conference room erupted. The shareholder representatives all stood up. Someone slammed the table. Someone loudly questioned the financial director. Someone pulled out a phone to start making calls. George slumped in his chair, the sweat on his forehead pouring down and covering his entire face. The legal counsel took the piece after piece of evidence I handed over, his face growing uglier with each page he flipped. Just then, the conference room door was pushed open. Invicta stood in the doorway. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie was crooked to one side, and his graying hair was a mess from the wind. In behind him was Serena. Her eyes were still swollen, but this time it was not from crying, it was from staying up too late. Her gaze swept over every face in the conference room before finally landing on me. Ethan, Victor's voice was hoarse and low. Did we not agree that everything would stop after the share transfer? Stop! I leaned back in my chair and looked at him. Uncle Victor, I said I wanted two things: in a public apology from Serena and a 15% equity transfer. You only gave me one. The matter of Serena's apology, we can discuss it further. There is nothing left to discuss. I cut him off, my gaze moving past him to land on Serena. Serena, do you remember what you had your father say to me in front of everyone on our wedding day? Serena's face went pale. You said, Ethan, Serena needs a little more time to think it over. I stood up, pronouncing every single word deliberately. Today, in this conference room, in front of all the directors of Wen Group. Serena, you tell me, have you thought it over clearly yet? Everyone in the conference room looked at Serena. She stood at the door, rainwater still staining her trench coat, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her hands were shaking, but I saw something in her eyes. It was not anger, and it was not fear. It was a kind of release that comes from finally facing everything. I have thought it over clearly. Her voice was not loud, but every word entered the ears of everyone in the room with perfect clarity. On September 16th, the day of the wedding, I was the one who voluntarily broke the engagement. Ethan was not at fault in any way. Serena, used that relationship, treating him as a tool to meet my investment conditions. The expressions of the shareholder representatives shifted from shock to disbelief. Serena took a deep breath and continued, I hereby formally apologize to Ethan. At the same time, I am willing to fully cooperate with the regulatory authorities in all investigations and accept the corresponding legal responsibilities for the financial fraud at Stellar Tech and Wen Group headquarters. Beside her, Victor closed his eyes. The conference room fell silent for a full 10 seconds. Then, the shareholder representatives all started making calls at the same time. The legal counsel was already in contact with the SEC. The financial director, George, covered his face, muffled sobs leaking through his fingers. Innie picked up my car keys from the table and walked past Serena. And as I passed her, she suddenly spoke, her voice very soft, audible only to me. Ethan, is there still any chance for us? No, I did not stop walking. What you did today, you did not do for me. You did it for yourself, for your father, for the innocent shareholders left at Wen Group. It has nothing to do with me. The moment the elevator doors closed, I leaned back against the elevator wall and let out a long breath. It was not relief. It was not satisfaction. It was a very strange sense of emptiness. Like spending all your energy climbing a mountain, reaching the summit, and finding there is nothing there at all, just a strong wind. Claire handed me a bottle of water. Mr. Lucian is waiting for you downstairs. He came. He just arrived. Claire paused. He said, today is the closing act and that he should be here. The elevator reached the first floor. Outside the main entrance, a black Maybach was parked. Lucian was sitting in the back seat. The window rolled down. He looked at me, and the corner of his mouth curved up slightly. Is it done? It is done. Wen Group's stock price should trigger a limit down before the market closes. And I have already sent people to negotiate with Apex Holdings. The case file on Vivian has been submitted as well. Lucian patted the seat next to him. Get in. Let us go have a meal. I got into the car and leaned back against the genuine leather seat, watching the roof of the Wen Group headquarters building shrink in the rain outside the car window. Mr. Lucian, a thought suddenly occurred to me. How will Apex Holdings be handled? Lucian did not answer right away. He was silent for a moment. then said something that made me think deeply for a long time afterward. What Damien did was a business strategy, not strictly illegal. The one who truly broke the law is Vivian. And Vivian, he turned his head to look at me, his gaze deeply meaningful, is the next person you will need to deal with. I froze. The next one? I had thought today's board meeting was the final stop. But on Lucian's chessboard, this was just the completion of a single node. His goal was never the Wen family. The Wen family was just a chess piece Vivian had dragged into the water. Who ordered Serena to cook those fake books? Lucian asked. Vivian. Who helped Victor design those fake contracts? Vivian. Then, on the day of the wedding, who convinced Serena not to go? Vivian. Innie rolled down the car window a crack, letting the rain and wind pour in together. That empty feeling disappeared, replaced by something else entirely. Inna shuddered at the realization that the finish line had not yet been reached. Mr. Lucian, I said, when did you start targeting Vivian? Lucian did not answer that question. He simply had the driver take us to a private dining restaurant he frequented, ordered a table full of dishes, and as I was picking up my first bite with my chopsticks, he said one thing. Ethan, do you know what I admire most about you? What? When everyone else expected you to cry, you were sharpening your knife. 4 days after the board meeting at Wen Group headquarters, the formal investigation notice from the regulatory authorities arrived. On the afternoon Victor was taken in for questioning. Wen Group's stock price had plummeted by 60% in just 3 trading days. The shareholder group chat exploded. Some were frantically selling, some were cursing, and some were trying to contact Lucian, hoping to sell their shares at a discount. The entire Wen Group was like a ship that had been drilled through its bottom, and everyone was scrambling for a lifeboat. Lucian sat in his office, observed all the market reactions, then picked up the phone and said only 3 words. We can enter. Lucian Capital's acquisition offer was sent out promptly at 9 o'clock the next morning. The offer price was 1.2 times the current market price. Not high, but for those shareholders desperate to offload their shares, it was already the only choice. Within 3 days, Lucian Capital had acquired 41% of Wen Group headquarters shares. Combined with the 15% Victor had transferred earlier, the total shareholding exceeded 56%. The control of Wen Group had officially changed hands. On Friday afternoon, Lucian called me to his office. Ilan and Marcus were both there. Spread on the table in front of the 3 of them was a document titled Wen Group Organizational Restructuring Plan in bold letters. Sit, Lucian pointed to the sofa. After I sat down, he pushed that document in front of me and said, the new CEO of Wen Group headquarters, you will take the position. I froze for a full 3 seconds. Marcus pushed up his glasses next to me, his expression very subtle. It was clear he had already known about this decision beforehand. Nolan stared out the window with a blank expression, as if all of this had nothing to do with him. Mr. Lucian, I carefully chose my words. I have never managed a listed company before. Serena has managed one. You have seen what the result was. Lucian leaned back in his chair, his tone completely casual, as if he was stating the most obvious thing in the world. Besides, no one knows better than you where the problems at Wen Group currently lie. You planted the landmines. You go dismantle them. I was only responsible for the due diligence. Ethan. Lucian cut me off, leaning his body forward slightly, his eyes fixed on me like a pair of nails. You spent 3 years in that family. You know every single one of their rotten accounts, every loophole, every hypocritical face. Now Wen Group has a new owner. Inside, everyone is panicked and uneasy. Outside, competitors are watching like tigers. Vivian and Apex Holdings are still waiting in the shadows to pick up the pieces. Do you think bringing in a professional manager could stabilize this situation? Marcus coughed next to me and said, Mr. Ethan, what Mr. Lucian means is very clear. What Wen Group needs right now is a person everyone knows, a person who can make them remember the lesson. I understood what Marcus meant. All those old officials, middle management, and employees at Wen Group headquarters, they all knew me. I was the poor boy who was dumped by Serena at the wedding. I was also the man who stormed into the board meeting with Lucian Capital's legal department and personally sent Victor into the investigation process. The fear they felt toward me was far more profound than the fear of a strange, parachuted in CEO. I have a condition, I said. Lucian raised an eyebrow. Name it. The entire organizational structure of Wen Group will be redone. The directors of the finance department, procurement department, and strategic development department will all be replaced. George is finished, but the heads of procurement and strategic development are Victor's old people. Do not trust them. Granted, Lucian did not hesitate in the slightest. You pick the people yourself. The human resources department at Lucian Capital will fully cooperate. One more thing. Name it. Serena. When I said that name, Marcus and Nolan both glanced at me at the same time. The way she is handled, I will decide. Lucian looked at me for 3 seconds, then picked up his teacup and took a sip. He said, "She is your ex-fiancée and your enemy. It is reasonable for you to decide." He pulled an envelope out of a drawer and pushed it toward me. Inside was a formal appointment letter. Chief Executive Officer of Wen Group, Ethan. The effective date was next Monday. When I took the appointment letter, my fingers tightened slightly. The weight of this piece of paper was far heavier than I had imagined. What it represented was not power, but a complete reversal. A month ago, I was sitting on the front steps of the St. Regis Hotel, my tie loosened, holding an unlit cigarette in my hand, thinking my life was over. A month later, I had become the master of that very building. Do not celebrate too early. Nolan suddenly spoke up, his voice still carrying that cold, hard tone. Although the case file on Vivian has been submitted, she is currently still out on bail. The legal team at Apex Holdings is protecting her, and Damien has already started making moves. Ingram Group has a new owner now. He will definitely try to take advantage of the chaos to poach clients. Let him come. I put the appointment letter into the inner pocket of my suit and stood up. Every client Wen Group has lost before. I will win them back, one by one. Lucian looked at me, the corner of his mouth lifting into a faint, ambiguous smile. He did not say another word, just waved his hand, signaling that I could leave. Monday morning, 8 o'clock, Wen Group headquarters. Innie stood at the entrance of the building, looking up at the brass nameplate that had hung there for over 20 years. In Group. The sunlight shone on it, the glare so bright it was hard to keep my eyes open. In behind me were Claire and 2 newly transferred department heads, all people I had brought over from Lucian Capital. The receptionist was still the same one from before. When she saw me walk through the revolving door, she practically sprang up from her chair, her lips trembling for a long time before she managed to squeeze out a sentence. "Good morning, Mr. Ethan." "Morning." I walked straight past her. After 2 steps, I stopped. Notify the HR department. 9 o'clock sharp. All personnel at the deputy director level and above to the main conference room for a meeting. Yes, Mr. Ethan. As the elevator ascended, I watched the red dot of the floor numbers jumping. I remembered the first time I had come to Wen Group headquarters 3 years ago. Innie was wearing a shirt I had bought on sale, holding the lunch I had brought for Serena. I was stopped by the receptionist in the lobby and made to wait for a full 40 minutes. When Serena came downstairs to get the food, her expression was more annoyed than grateful. She said, "Just leave it here. I will eat it later," and then turned around and went back into the elevator. That box of food was eventually thrown into the trash by the receptionist. I saw it with my own eyes. The elevator reached the top floor. The moment the doors opened, everyone walking in the corridor stopped moving at the same time. Some looked down and pretended to check their phones. Some quickly ducked into the nearest office. Others just froze on the spot, their expressions as if they had just seen a ghost. I walked straight toward the CEO's office. The nameplate with Serena's name had already been removed from the door. In its place was a brand new plate, engraved with a single name, Ethan. I reached out and pushed the door open. The office was very large. An entire wall of floor-to-ceiling windows faced directly onto the central axis of the city. The sunlight flooded the entire desk. Remnants of Serena still remained. In a coffee mug she had not had time to take away. In a potted plant, half of it already withered. And a photo of her and Vivian, both of them laughing brilliantly in the picture. I picked up that photo, looked at it for 2 seconds, and then threw it into the trash can. 9 o'clock sharp. The main conference room. Over 30 department heads sat in perfect order. No one was late. No one was whispering to their neighbor. The events of the last board meeting had clearly spread throughout the entire Wen group. Everyone looked at me with a complex fear. They had no idea what this new boss was going to do next. Good morning, everyone. I took my seat at the head of the table. In there was no preamble. Ine got straight to the point. As of today, Wen Group is officially controlled by Lucian Capital. I am the new CEO, Ethan. Next, I have 3 things to announce. The conference room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. First, the directors of finance, procurement, and strategic development will complete their handovers today and leave their positions tomorrow. Their replacements are already in place. Ina will issue a formal notice shortly. A suppressed ripple of disturbance came from the corners, but no one dared to speak out. Second, the contracts of all current employees will be re-signed starting today. Salaries will be raised by 15%, but performance standards will double. Those who can work, stay. Those who are just coasting, leave on their own. The old rule at Wen Group was to keep idle people around. As of today, that rule is abolished. Some people gasped. Some people's eyes lit up. Third, I stood up, placed my hands on the conference table, and looked down at every single person present. I know that among you, many have had various forms of contact with Victor, Vivian, and Apex Holdings in the past. Inni will not investigate today. Inni will not pursue. But from this moment on, if anyone still dares to leak Wen Group's information to the outside, I will not have the legal department come talk to you. Inni will talk to you personally. As I said this, my gaze swept over the old director of procurement and the deputy director of strategic development. Both of them had their heads down, the sweat on their necks reflecting the light. Meeting adjourned. Over 30 people stood up at the same time. The sound of chairs scraping against the floor filled the air. No one spoke. No one dared to be the first to walk out of the conference room. Everyone was waiting for me to leave first. When I walked out of the conference room, Claire was waiting for me at the door, a tablet in her hand. Her expression was a bit strange. Mr. Ethan, Serena is waiting for you in your office? What is she here for? Claire hesitated for a moment before saying, she brought her resignation letter, and she said she wants to talk to you face to face one last time. I walked in the direction of my office, passing through the corridor. I saw Serena's back through the glass. She was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her figure was much thinner than I remembered. She was wearing a plain blouse, and her hair was not pinned up, just casually draped over her shoulders. Hearing the door open, she turned around. The second I met her eyes, I realized the light in them had completely changed. In there was no more arrogance, no more shrewdness, no more calculation. In there was only a kind of peace that comes after accepting one's fate. Mr. Ethan. When she addressed me, she used this brand new title, and her tone carried no sarcasm or resentment. It was merely a statement of fact. Sit. I pointed to the sofa, then walked around to sit behind my desk. That photo was still in the trash can. Inni did not know if she had seen it. Serena did not sit. She took an envelope out of her bag and placed it on my desk. This is my resignation letter. I am resigning from the positions of CEO of Stellar Tech and Vice President of Wen Group Headquarters, effective immediately. I picked up the envelope, glanced at it, and set it aside. And what about on the regulatory side? The process is already underway. Her voice was very steady, as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. My lawyer says that cooperating with the investigation and voluntarily confessing will be taken into account during sentencing. The worst-case scenario is 3 years. The best case is probation. I looked at her face, searching for any trace of pretense. There was none. She had truly accepted it. Why did you still come here? I asked. Serena was silent for a moment, then pulled another item from her bag and placed it on the desk. It was an invitation card. I opened it. It was the invitation we had custom-made when we got engaged last year, our names and the date printed on it. This invitation was exactly the same as the ones I had sent out before the wedding. The only difference was that the edges of this invitation were worn, as if someone had opened and read it over and over again many times. I kept this invitation the whole time. Serena's voice finally cracked open. On the morning of the wedding, I put it in my clutch before I went out. When the driver was halfway there, Vivian's call came through. She said that if I went to the wedding on the day Lucian audited the books, not only would I go to prison, but my father would too. Her fingers were gripping the strap of her bag, her knuckles white. So I did not go. I thought by not going to the wedding I could stall everything. I thought Vivian was genuinely trying to help me. She took a deep breath. It was not until the day you called me to Lucian Capital that I went back and checked Vivian's accounts. That was when I found out she had been working for Apex Holdings the entire time. It is not too late for you to know now. It is too late. Serena raised her head and looked at me. Her eyes were red, but the tears did not fall. Ethan, what I did wrong was not just the day of the wedding. Was wrong from the very beginning. I thought you could not flip the table. In the end, you flipped the entire table over. She pushed the invitation a little closer to me. In this, you can keep it or you can throw it away. I am leaving it here as a way to give myself some closure. After Serena said that, she left. This time, she did not stumble. Her footsteps were steady, and her back was straight. When she reached the door, she paused for a moment, but she did not turn her head back. Ethan, you are stronger than me. You can hold this position. The door closed, and I was left alone in the office. I looked down at that worn invitation card. The date printed on it had passed an entire month ago. A month ago, I was standing at the entrance of the St. Regis Hotel, thinking my life had been torn to shreds by this invitation. A month later, I was sitting in the CEO chair of Wen Group, looking at the same invitation, and I felt absolutely nothing in my heart. Picked up the invitation and placed it in the trash can, right next to that photo. Then I pressed the intercom. Claire, send me the latest investigation progress from the Lucian Capital Legal Department. I want to personally follow up on Vivian's case. Vivian's case formally entered the trial process a month later. I had personally organized the evidentiary materials, a total of 7 archival boxes. They contained the bank transaction records from the 3 shell companies under her name, 2 years of communication logs between her and Damien, and screenshots of every single email in which she had instructed Serena to cook the books. After looking through it all, Nolan said one thing. The completeness of the evidentiary chain in this case ranked in his top 3 among all the commercial cases he had ever handled. Did not attend the trial. Claire went on my behalf. When she came back, she brought a piece of news. Vivian had retracted her confession in court and shifted all the blame onto Serena and Victor, claiming she was just a financial officer executing orders. The judge did not accept it because the evidence was simply too solid. The final sentencing recommendation was 7 years, 2 years more than what Victor got. What about Damien? I asked Claire. Apex Holdings issued a public statement saying Vivian's actions were her own personal behavior and had nothing to do with the company. Damien himself did not attend the trial. Claire paused and added, but he hired the best lawyer for Vivian. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Wen Group CEO's office, looking down at the traffic below. Damien had played this hand very cleverly. He sacrificed a limb to save the body, framing his sister's case as a personal act to protect the main entity of Apex Holdings. But what he did not know was that Lucian had already placed Apex Holdings on the watch list for the next phase. A few days ago, Marcus told me there was a new due diligence proposal on Lucian's desk. The cover had only one word on it, in Apex, but those were matters for a later time. On December 23rd, the winter solstice, Lucian called me. 7 o'clock tonight, the Horizon Suite at the Zenith Club. His voice still carried that assured, no confirmation needed rhythm. Dress formally. What is the occasion? A celebration. Lucian hung up right after saying that, exactly the same as that call at 3 in the morning 3 months ago. At 7 in the evening, I arrived at the Zenith Club. The moment the elevator doors opened, I saw 7 or 8 people already seated in the Horizon Suite. Marcus and Nolan were there, along with several senior executives from Lucian Capital and 2 faces I recognized from the financial news. Members of Lucian's private board of directors, Lucian sat in the seat of honor. He was wearing a dark blue mandarin collar suit today, a rare break from his usual style. He looked a little less oppressive than usual and a bit more relaxed. Everyone is here. He patted the empty seat next to him, signaling for me to sit. The banquet was of a very high standard. The dishes arrived one after another. The wine opened was a Burgundy from Lucian's private collection. During the dinner, Marcus had a bit to drink and became 3 times more talkative than usual, recounting every single thing I had done since I joined the company with plenty of embellishment. Nolan silently ate his food in the corner, occasionally glancing up at me with a look that was much softer than before. After a few rounds of wine, Lucian suddenly stood up, holding a glass, and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Everyone, his voice was not loud, but the entire Horizon suite fell silent. Ethan has been at Lucian Capital for 3 months. He led the Wen Group acquisition, pulled Wen Group headquarters back from the brink of collapse, and along the way, sent 3 people to prison. What do you all think? Marcus was the first to raise his glass. I have nothing to say. Nolan put down his chopsticks and, uncharacteristically, spoke up. Mr. Ethan does things with an excellent sense of proportion. The others chimed in with their agreement. Innie sat in my seat. The wine in my glass turned amber by the light. Lucian turned around to look at me. There was something in his gaze I could not quite name. He walked over to me with his wine and said, "Ethan, let me tell you a story." I put down my glass and nodded. 23 years ago, there was a young man of 18 who came from a small town up north to this city for university. His family was very poor. His tuition was borrowed and he lived off part-time jobs. In his sophomore year, he fell for a girl from the same school. The girl's family was in the construction materials business. They were not fabulously wealthy, but in that era, they were considered well off. Everyone in the Horizon suite went quiet. Marcus's hand holding his wine glass froze in midair. The young man chased her for 2 years. After graduation, they got together. The girl's father neither objected nor supported it. He just put forward one condition. Before they got married, the young man had to come up with a $300,000 dowry, plus the down payment on a house. Lucian's tone was very calm, as if he was telling someone else's story. The young man worked like mad to earn money. He did sales, set up street stalls, flipped electronics. He did whatever he could to earn money. After grinding away for 4 years, he finally scraped together that sum. On the day he went to ask for her hand in marriage, the girl's father took the dowry, smiled and said one sentence. Lucian took a sip of his wine. He said, "Actually, from the very beginning, I never planned on letting my daughter marry you. But the money I will be keeping now. You can leave." The entire Horizon suite was dead silent. Innie sat in my chair, the muscles in my back tensing up inch by inch. It was not from shock, but because when Lucian said this sentence, his eyes were looking directly at me. That young man was me, Lucian, 23 years later. He placed his empty glass back on the table, his voice as calm as a stagnant pool of water. The girl's father was surnamed Wen. His name was Victor. And as for the girl herself, you can probably guess. The fingers holding my wine glass trembled slightly. Serena's mother. I heard my own voice, dry and hoarse. Correct. Lucian sat back down and poured himself another glass of wine. Victor used the exact same trick on more than one person back then. Innie was just luckier. Innie was not chosen to be the groom on the wedding day. Innie was merely humiliated on the day I went to propose and then thrown out of the Wen family's door. He raised his glass toward the thousands of lights outside the window. 23 years. Innie waited 23 years. Victor probably does not even remember me. After all, he humiliated too many young men. Innie was just a nobody, not worth remembering. Lucian turned his head to look at me, but I remember him. I remember how many teeth he showed when he smiled. I remember the tea on his desk was Lucian. I remember a fake landscape painting hanging on the wall behind him. Every single frame, I remember it. Marcus spoke softly from the side. "Mr. Lucian, so this was the origin of the Wen Group acquisition case." It was not the acquisition case. Lucian shook his head. Ethan was the origin. He looked at me. There was no smugness in his eyes, no showing off. There was only a kind of scrutiny, as if he was confirming something he had already confirmed many times over. 3 years ago, I started looking for someone who could enter the Wen family's inner circle. I filtered through Serena's colleagues, classmates, and business partners. None of them was suitable. Until one day, my assistant told me Serena was dating a man named Ethan. No background, a failed entrepreneur, but hopelessly devoted to her. You had your eye on me since then? I asked. I was not watching you. I was waiting. Lucian picked up the wine jug and refilled my glass, waiting for the right moment. Knew Serena's nature. Sooner or later, she would do something to break up with you or divorce you. When that happened, you would be my ideal candidate. But I never imagined the method she would choose would be so absolute. Publicly humiliating you at the altar, turning you into a joke in front of the entire city. He raised his own glass toward me. Ethan, do you know how long I waited for that message you sent me on your wedding day? I looked into his eyes without speaking. I waited 3 years. Lucian's voice was finally tinged with a hint of emotion that did not belong to his usual persona. The moment you sent that message to the wrong person, I knew. The time had come. He raised his glass in front of me. So here is to that missent message. I stood up and raised my glass. The sound of the two glasses clinking together was crisp and brief, like a full stop. The person you hated was not Serena, I suddenly said. The person you hated was Victor. I do not hate anyone. Lucian finished the wine in his glass and sat back on the sofa, reverting to his unruffled demeanor. Hatred is a very inefficient emotion. I waited 23 years not for revenge. Did it to prove that the poor boy he kicked out his door back then could now buy his entire building. He looked at me, and the faintest of smiles floated on his lips. Ethan, in this matter, you did it better than I did. You only waited 3 months. The city lights outside covered the entire floor-to-ceiling window like a giant spider web, every strand connected to different directions and possibilities. Sat in the highest club in the city, finishing the last glass of wine with the man who had been humiliated by the Wen family 23 years before me. Marcus softly asked a question from the side. Mr. Lucian, is Serena's mother still alive? She passed away 20 years ago. Lucian stood up and draped his suit jacket over his arm. The woman Victor married later was Serena's stepmother. In truth, Serena does not carry much of her mother's blood. After he said this, he walked toward the door. Halfway there, he stopped and said without turning his head, Ethan, you will continue to hold the CEO position at Wen Group. When spring comes next year, there will be a new chessboard to set up. What chessboard? Apex Holdings. Lucian's voice came from the doorway, steady and assured. Damien owes his sister justice, but more than that, he owes this market an explanation. Be ready. I will send you the due diligence materials next month. As he walked out of the Horizon suite, Marcus leaned in and whispered to me, Mr. Lucian never does anything he is not sure about. The fact that he is letting you handle the Apex case means he already considers you one of his own people. I leaned back on the sofa and looked at the city nightscape outside the window. 3 months ago, I had sat on this same sofa, my back drenched in a cold sweat while facing Lucian. 3 months later, I was sitting here, having finished the same bottle of wine with him. My phone suddenly buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from an unknown number. Mr. Ethan, this is Serena. All the case materials have been submitted. Start community corrections next Monday. You do not need to reply. Just wanted to let you know. Thank you. I did not reply. After deleting the message, I put my phone back in my pocket, stood up, and walked out of the Horizon suite. As the elevator descended, I could see the winter night of the entire city through the glass exterior wall. People on the street were wrapped in thick coats, hurrying along. The sign of a hot pot restaurant glowed harshly in the night. The traffic on the distant overpass looked like a glowing river. This city was no different than it was 3 months ago. But the man standing in this city was completely different now. When I got back to the Wen Group CEO's office, it was already 11 o'clock at night. The city lights outside were a bit more sparse, but still beautiful. On the desk was a new photo frame, a gift from Marcus last week to celebrate my onboarding. It was a group photo of the Lucian Capital Wen Group project team. I stood in the very center, flanked by Claire, Marcus, and Nolan. The background was the Wen Group headquarters building. I straightened the photo frame and then turned on my computer. The moment the screen lit up, a new email notification popped up. The sender was Lucian. The subject line had only one word: Apex. I opened the email. The content was the preliminary due diligence framework for Apex Holdings. In there were 12 folders attached, each labeled with a different module: equity structure, related party transactions, executive backgrounds, bank credit lines, historical litigation records. On the last line of the email, Lucian had written only one sentence: "This chessboard is bigger than Wen Group." I closed the email and leaned back in my chair, looking at the winter night sky outside the window. The city's light pollution was too heavy to see many stars, but occasionally a speck or two of light would flash past from a night-flying plane, like someone striking a match in the sky. 3 months ago, the name Lucian was one I could only see in magazines. 3 months later, I had teamed up with him to topple Wen Group, and the next target was Apex Holdings. I picked up my phone and scrolled to that missent message from 3 in the morning. 3 months later, it was still at the very top of the chat window with the name Lucian next to it. "Serena, you won. Today, I became the biggest joke in front of the entire city. Starting tomorrow, you will regret every decision you made today." I had never recalled that message because sending it to the wrong person was the best thing I had ever done.